Зараз покажемо нашу розмову з Гарпером про проблему для України, яку викликала справа Юлії Тимошенко.
We understand that the government of Canada is fully aware of the current situation in Ukraine. And what about the fine line between, on one hand, making sure that Mr. Yanukovych or the government of Ukraine adheres to the principles of democracy and using, for example, free trade as leverage for that, and the other line about actually pushing him away away from Europe, let's say, into the arms of Russia?
Well, as I say, I think his government's own aspiration is clearly to be part of the Euro-Atlantic community. But, you know, those aspirations come with democratic norms. President Yanukovych is a very, in my own experience, a very intelligent and strong leader, and can be very successful under a fully democratic system. But you know, right now there is this contradiction, and it's something we have to watch very closely. And you know, we don't want to obviously drive Ukraine in a different direction, but obviously some of the things that are happening are of concern are not because the West is driving Ukraine in a different direction. These are actions the state has taken on its own, which are of great concern to us.
What I wanted to ask you is about the underlining issue of Russia continuously trying to undermine and interfere Ukraine's process in democracy and sort of isolate it from the West, and therefore bring it back into this post-Soviet system that they want to create. What can Canada do in this regard to in a sense, protect the fledgling democracy that Ukraine is, and then maybe, in a sense, neutralize Russia in relation to future issues that may arrive even, let's say, in the Arctic?
Well, as you know, we're extremely strong supporters of Ukrainian freedom and independence. Canada was the first Western country to recognize that fact after the breakup of the Soviet Union. That's something we're very proud of. The Yulia Tymoshenko issue is obviously of great concern. Yuri, in fairness, I'm not sure we see it as a Russian issue. This is more a fundamental issue about democratic norms, a vigorous opposition, judicial independence, and sound judicial process. These are fundamental bases of a democratic society. I know that Ukraine, including under its current president, aspires to be part of the Euro-Atlantic community, part of the European Union, to have good relationships with countries like Canada. And we're anxious to build that as well. But the basis of that relationship has to be norms of freedom, democracy, and justice. I've written President Yanukovych to make that clear, how concerned I am about this situation. Minister Baird has said that you know, this could have serious consequences on bilateral relations between Canada and Ukraine. So we're obviously going to continue to push hard. I actually do think the current government in Ukraine understands that its long-run interests are not aligned to Russia, but aligned to the broader democratic community. But then the government's own practices have to reflect those values.
Do you think the fact that you visited Ukraine and met the Prime Minister of Ukraine yourself, or
the
President, yes, is, do you think you have potentially yourself influence over what he may do?
You know, we'll do what we can, and we are doing what we can, and we'll continue to do what we can to try and influence the government of Ukraine. But, you know, these values that I actually think reflect the true values of the Ukrainian people, ultimately have to be embraced by its own government. The government cannot be ambivalent about them. And they go hand in hand with the kind of prosperous, trading, Euro-Atlantic society that President Yanukovych says he wants to create. So, you know, I think we've obviously got work to do to show that, you know, we have to kind of walk the talk here.
We're here on an auspicious occasion, and we congratulate you for receiving this, or going to be receiving this Shevchenko Award, and maybe a few comments about how you feel about this.
Well, you know, it's a great honor. You know, I've often said that growing up in Toronto and had many Ukrainian friends who, you know, I've always said in that era, Ukrainian Canadians kind of lived under a cloud, knowing, you know, how bad things were back in their homeland. And I've always been just a huge fan of what's occurred in Ukraine, the fact that Ukraine's won its freedom, and as we know, the man this award is named after is really in many ways the spiritual leader of that whole desire for freedom and independence. And so it's a great honor. You know, Yuri, the truth is when you get these kinds of awards, you know, it's a great honor to have it. I always feel that, you know, I don't really measure up to these awards. So I tend to look at the award really as not just for me, but as, you know, support for the government and for Canada more generally, for what it's done over the years to embrace and encourage Ukrainian freedom and independence. And certainly the award's an opportunity for me to remind Ukrainian Canadians that our government will continue to stand for those values.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.